Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the updates to the Suella Braverman saga as the Home Secretary digs in, even as her statements and admissions just create more and more inconsistencies in her previous stories, but how Rishi Sunak is seemingly powerless to act, with the potential to end his honeymoon period earlier than planned. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Suella Braverman was a very loose cannon during Liz Truss's brief tenure as Prime Minister. It wasn't just the behaviour that's generating a lot of scrutiny right now. She kept, for example, announcing policies that were in direct contradiction to those of the government. She was out of control. Well, as far as I can tell, she's even more of a loose cannon now. Sunak courted her supports pretty hard during the most recent leadership contest, and obviously still feels that it is essential. I saw some reports of letters of no confidence in Sunak going in already, and people getting on top of it. It's like, this is not serious, because it just seems to be from some figures on the right who were basically supporting Boris Johnson. Just like Truss before him, Sunak is safe from a standard leadership challenge for a full year. And I know you'll go, yeah, what happened to Truss then? Well, the reason that this didn't help Liz Truss in the end was that an overwhelming number of Tory MPs indicated to Sir Graham Brady that they wanted her gone, and if you have to change the rules, change the rules. The same thing's not going to happen to Rishi Sunak because he is the preferred pick of the majority of his MPs. So what's the point of this report about letters and so on? What's the point of some Tory MPs telling correspondents that these letters are going in? Probably as a warning shot across Sunak's bow. Right now, he is under the most intense pressure to get rid of Braverman. How much pressure depends on how the opposition and Labour in particular deal with the issues, because what really matters is public opinion. You know, Labour have some ammunition. Braverman released a letter yesterday detailing her latest account. It left a lot of questions still to be answered. She tried to defend herself in Parliament even about sending sensitive documents via her personal email so that it would be more convenient for her in meetings. The problem is that this isn't good enough. Her convenience is not worth national security. Like, as a teacher, I used to transfer some files between my work computer and my home computer so that I could carry on working, preparing, marking and so on. But I couldn't just do this for anything. I could only do this for like lesson planning, maybe some data analysis, but minimal information on the students, maybe their names and that's it. I couldn't just send myself files with lots of personal information on it, for example. So as a teacher, I was restricted, and I was trained on what the restrictions were in the information that I could send via email or take away from my classroom with. How much more important for the Home Secretary, who is not only dealing with way more sensitive information, but will absolutely be targeted on a daily basis by foreign agents and others who don't have the UK's best interests at heart. I didn't have Russian or Chinese agents tapping into my email. There was nothing of interest to them. The use of personal emails and phones is a serious risk to national security, especially when used by people who are clearly going to be targeted by agents of other powers. And the Home Secretary just doesn't seem to accept this. And it goes beyond Braverman as well, because this is a culture that seemed to develop under Boris Johnson. And the reason, it's nothing to do with convenience. It's to avoid accountability. That's why they use personal devices. The reason why so many members of the cabinet, past and present, and including Boris Johnson himself, used personal means of communication is to avoid scrutiny from their own officials or from opposition later on when things came out. Remember how Johnson used the Vardy defence, when an investigation demanded he hand over WhatsApp messages. Oh, sorry, my phone broke, I had to get another one. And people will be saying, well, that doesn't matter. But that's the excuse he used and he seemed to get away with it. How many more cabinet ministers have been using personal means of communication to avoid scrutiny? And what have they been saying that warrants avoiding this scrutiny? Because what's the problem with scrutiny unless you're saying things or saying things to people you shouldn't be? The only reason we really know about this is because some of these people were especially reckless and it blew up. Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman. They're not the most careful of people. But we may find that there have been rather more careful ministers doing the same thing as well. But this is potentially a major problem for Sunak. I genuinely don't know how big a problem until we see polls indicating public opinion. What I see so far is it's a little bit split, and arguably it's not that big a problem for him. Because sometimes it's funny what the public get outraged at. Though the Braverman-inspired disasters at the Marston Immigration Centre at the weekend will have at least focused people's minds on the Home Secretary. You know, people interested in one scandal related to a government minister are maybe more likely to be interested in reading about others. But it remains to be seen exactly what the public think. If they decide that Braverman's out of control and needs to be removed, then Sunak is in trouble. And that is because, even if the public overwhelmingly want her gone, he obviously still needs her support internally. Otherwise, she surely would be gone. Although Sunak's position as Prime Minister is safe for now, if Braverman is leading a significant faction of MPs on the right of the party, they could threaten votes in Parliament. The nuclear option would be refusing to vote for his budget. At that point, he's unable to govern, and a general election is the only sensible course of action. And Sunak will surely judge that he is playing the long game here, and that Braverman's damage is the short term only. Besides, it may well be that Braverman is of net use to the government in stoking the culture wars that were so useful under Boris Johnson for distracting people from the main damage the Tories were doing, which is undermining our public services to the point where it's easy to sell them off to private investors. That is actually the Tories' long game here. Remember Sunak's visit to the USA to hold talks with private healthcare providers. That was worrying enough when he was Chancellor. He's now Prime Minister. So much depends on the public's reaction. If Braverman becomes the focal point for the next wave of Tory sleaze, then she's going to prove a very expensive acquisition for Sunak's team. And there are backbench Tory MPs who are openly attacking Braverman's conduct here, which is an indicator that their own constituents have been bending their ears over the issue. They certainly seem to think the public are opposed to Braverman's antics. After all, these same MPs didn't complain when Priti Patel was basically doing the same thing, at least with regards management of immigration. When a Tory MP complains about something that their own government's doing, it's invariably because their constituents are giving it to them in the necks. Because even when they're personally opposed, they're usually disciplined enough to avoid a public row because they understand the electoral power of appearing united. The good news for Sunak is that it doesn't look like that many people are following the story that closely. I saw a latest poll that indicated how closely people are following it. It's not a massive number. Another crucial factor would be where the swing voters stand on Braverman's various antics. You know, the focus will be on those who voted Conservative in 2019 in certain target seats. What do they think? If the opposition to Braverman's behaviour is largely focused among voters who wouldn't vote Tory anyway, Sunak's laughing. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much people on the left are outraged, we're not going to vote Tory. Indeed, even if you think Sunak is trying his best to genuinely govern, unlike his predecessors, he must know that come the next election, his party has no record to defend. His best case scenario is that he will be able to claim he's steered the country through the mess that was caused by the Tory government. That's the best he can hope for. Frankly, divisive culture wars are their only hope of retaining power, so it's as much in Sunak's interest that gobshites like Braverman carry on doing their thing, as long as it doesn't turn off too many of their voters in those crucial battlegrounds. If it upsets a few moderate Conservatives in safe seats, sod it, they're not at risk. But if the reckless disregard for national security or human lives, or both, is upsetting swing voters in target seats, then Sunak is in trouble. Because if he sticks by her for too long, there's a risk of permanent damage being done to the reputation of the government. He tried to claim when he became leader that he would govern, with integrity. Well, that's sort of out the window. Even if he acts later on, it will only be seen that he eventually acted when he came under pressure, that he didn't act with that integrity himself. Whereas if he sacks her, he could get the public back on side, but then he risks a critical mass of opposition from within his own party. So there's those on the right who wanted Johnson back as leader. They're already waiting for their chance to trip him up. They will do it as soon as they feel that they've got a chance. They're just hibernating at the moment. If Braverman's supporters would also work with them, should she be sacked, then maybe there's enough of them to derail his government. Sunak's only defence against them then would be the threat of a general election. one that the Tories would certainly lose if the reason for that election was their party being plunged into chaos and ungovernable. The question would be, would the rebels back down at this prospect, or would they simply not care? The next week will probably be instructive here. If Braverman survives it, it's quite likely to peter out, because it's quite likely that Tory MPs think that they can ride it out, and they'll be paying close attention to public opinion there. The right-wing press are doing their best to paint Braverman in a positive light. The usual suspects are out in force defending her to the hilt. But, you know, we'll see. But right now, although there are some people going, well, Braverman surely are gone and out, it's totally untenable. How many times have people said that in the past? How many times did people say that about Boris Johnson, for example? Or Braverman's predecessor, Priti Patel? How many times? And yet they're stuck on. You know, I would say at the moment, Braverman's digging in very hard. And also, I've seen no signs of Sunak softening on this. Like, usually if a minister is about to be thrown under the bus, you get a bit more equivocation from messages of support from Downing Street. So it goes from, oh, I got full support, and it becomes a little bit more vague if they're about to get the chop. So far, the support from Downing Street seems to be quite robust, indicating that Sunak thinks he's safer pissing off the public than his Home Secretary, at least for now. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.